We're back on track to find good bosses in Black Myth Wukong, and I believe it's slowly getting warmer. Last time we looked at bosses that weren't quite so good, and I know there's still a few people were expecting to see in part 1. Well, you'll probably see them in just a minute. Let's begin with number 60. Starting off with Non-Pure. In hindsight, I feel like this boss and a couple of the following ones should probably be in mediocre tier, but I don't want to mess up the chapter structure I've got going on, so whatever, let's just call them bottom of decent tier. The problem with Non-Pure is that he does a terrible job at distinguishing himself from not just the other nons of this chapter, but any boss from any chapter. He feels like a lesser version of the Black Wind King, stripped of all of his teleportation powers and given the Infinity Gauntlet instead. As means of blocking out damage, it's very ineffective, but at least it gives him a counterattack. But that won't stop you from simply taking a step back, charging up a heavy attack while he's just standing in place, and unleashing it in his fat face. The reason I opted to exploit his AI like that is because up close, his melee combos have really unintuitive tells. Slight delays, then instant unreactable releases. The only way to learn these is by memorization, which I don't mind doing if the boss is otherwise fun. But I couldn't be bothered to do it for such an uninteresting opponent as Non-Pure. 59. Gold Armored Rhino. This is a boss I'm sure many would have put lower, and to be clear, I don't like this boss. It's again, top of mediocre, bottom of decent. It's very similar to the other beast-type bosses I wasn't fond of. Same kind of front-facing attacks, back kicks if you get behind it, and running around for seemingly no reason. The one thing this beast has that the others don't is a gold armor gimmick. At first I thought the point was to avoid hitting the boss in the horn as it will deflect you, but thanks to hints by my man Bagier, I realized what a golden opportunity for damage destroying it is. There are other bosses with gold or stone armor that will require build-up heavy attacks, but usually you don't have many other options than to just keep dodging until you've built up enough focus. But since the rest of the Rhino's body is still flesh and blood, you can use that as means for racking up the necessary focus. So I like that idea. However, I think the bad AI for the boss incentivizes you to just stand in place, let the boss run around, during which you can charge up a heavy, and then bonk it in the face when it comes back. So, decent idea, but kind of boring to execute. Number 58, everyone's least favorite, Captain Wise Voice. People were not very pleased I didn't spew bile all over this deer infused with lasers and whatever this bowl is. If you hate this boss, I can absolutely see it. Unlike the boss, whom I can't see with the shit camera. I can imagine it being really annoying if you're struggling. Personally for me, it was smooth sailing. And after escaping the Pagoda prison, one of the least enjoyable experiences of my life, and I've had kidney stones 3 times. It was just nice to finally get outside and fight a standard boss. While I thought its basic attacks were overly basic, I did really love the ultimate move where you have to find a safe spot on the ground while also dodging homing lightning strikes. Looks cool, feels good. After running around in circles through endless corridors, falling off ledges, and wondering what the fuck this debuff is, I was just so happy to have a problem I could solve by simply attacking it. And this thing is the source of those debuffs, so it was sweet revenge as well. Number 57, Non-Void. My memory is void when it comes to this fight. The only reason I have any interest in him is because of his connection to the previously seen animation, which was wonderful. Great little story where a man rescues an injured fox, but is then given a dream of the fox becoming a real woman, falling in love with him, before eventually turning back into a beast and ending it all in bloodshed. So out of fear of it turning true, he kills the fox. We can see the guilt has weighed on him ever since, and we get a conclusion to his story when we find the fox's spirit. Only the conclusion is to just kill him for revenge. I think I preferred the story as it was, not even necessarily to be taken as literal, but rather metaphorical, for either the nature of humans, or how the Celestial Court viewed Wukong. A possible threat, not yet manifested. So in their eyes, it must be eradicated before that can happen. This okay-ish fight didn't really add much to it for me. I guess the flying paper attack is kinda cool. I'll give him that. Number 56 is Captain Lotus Vision. All these captains sound like reject Avengers. I actually hated this boss when I did the fight at first, even by the time I beat it. But I partially attribute that to just the area itself, we're back in the Pagoda, and my expectations for the boss. I saw a lot of people were dismayed at how bad this boss is, so I went into it already thinking I'm gonna have a bad experience. So of course I didn't really try learning it, I just wanted to survive it. But looking back at it and combing through my own footage, I don't see anything I can say that's actually negative about it. The instant shooting beams are fair thanks to the flash right before firing, the slower moving projectiles I could have simply deflected using staff spin, so their annoyance is entirely on me, and the ultimate attacks are for once actually challenging. That is, if you don't just cheese using an elevated platform. First there's a beam chasing you, forcing you to run, all while you still have to carefully time dodges. Then the second part is almost like a bullet hell where spatial awareness is required. As you can see, I was absolutely dogshit at both, but analyzing the footage, I think they're reasonable to dodge. I can see how they work. Just gotta channel your inner Ada Wong. And he has another ultimate move, this one far less challenging, but visually really neat. That's the one thing all these Avengers have in common, cool visuals and good sound design. I'll have to give it a second try someday, see if I'll enjoy it more now that I have a better understanding. Number 55, Daoist Mi. Or Daoist Mid if you fought the boss. Or, for me, Daoist Mist. I met the NPC, figured I'd finish his quest after killing the boss of the area, and he disappeared. Whoops! So I'm gonna have to rely on the comments of others for this one, as well as what little I've observed through other people's videos. I thought it was very mid. Beat him first try and no hit his first phase. Second was just kinda annoying, very similar to the insect head monk enemies. I have him high C or low B. Phase 1 is really cool and enjoyable, with a pretty unique moveset for such a throwaway fight. But in Phase 2 he becomes a reskin of the Centipede head guys around the temple, which sucks. I don't think I even noticed any changes, lol. To me it looks like a boss I would have put a fair bit lower myself, but others say he's okay, so I'll just take their word for it, for now. 54, Yellow-Robed Squire. This time I can speak from experience, and I would say the Yellow-Robed Squire is exactly how you should make an NPC mini-boss. You have one idea, a gimmick, in this case the boss using sand to obscure his attacks, and you just run with that. You'd need more than that to make a full-on multi-faced boss, but for a little NPC guy I, and probably everyone, will first try easy peasy in no time at all, that's what I want. 53, Amourworm. Or Amourworm? I'm not sure if this is a typo, because when a character says the name, it's clearly Amourworm. The Amourworm. Like, what the fuck is an Amourworm? Apparently it would translate to a sex worm, or a fucker worm. Well, fittingly, I had a pretty good time smashing this boss. I absolutely dominated her, but I enjoyed our one-night stand nonetheless. Then she started shitting all over me. How many times have I said that? 52, Son of Stones. For all the failed attempts to bring some life to the open world section in Chapter 6, I believe Son of Stones does the most to add character. He's just chilling by the edge of a cliff, clapping joyfully at the sights, without a worry in the world. And then we come along to ruin his day for absolutely no reason. At first he tries to just swat us away and continue his leisure. When it becomes apparent we're not going away, a fight ensues. He uses lightning effects to enhance his stomps and slams, and that's about it. Very standard stuff with nothing particularly bad or super exciting. It's not worth killing a harmless rock guy for such a basic fight, so I chose to reject violence and make peace. Number 51 is gonna be the encapsulation of all the bad frog experiences I've had. Let me explain. There are 6 frog bosses in this game, and I don't want to count all of them separate so as to not inflate the list. So instead I put all the less good encounters I had with the croakers in this spot, and the better ones we'll get to later. I thought the first one was forgettable and easy, the second one a jump in difficulty, but still worth a mention here because this one made me give up on the pillar stance after seeing this. I thought pillar stance just didn't work as means of avoiding damage, but it turns out it was just a shitbox. All the frogs have it, but that was the one time it pissed me off. I'll also include the ice variant for its annoying frost AoE walk, and my first experience with the rock frog because it was bugged and his stone shell was unbreakable, no matter how many times I landed a heavy or a spirit attack. That's totally bullshit. But even my worst experiences with the frogs is still better than more than a third of the game's bosses. Number 50, Guangmo. This orc-looking dude is the game's first spellcaster boss, and he sets an acceptable enough foundation for others to follow and improve upon. He's quick, can get out of stun locks, repositions himself, and has a variety of super quick and slower moving projectiles. Good ingredients for sure, but we do see them being used to cook some better bosses later down the line. The one unique quality of his is the snake summons, which will force you to go on the defense until they're gone. They're the one thing he has up his sleeve that will take the fight from 0 to 60, but it's up to a dice roll how often he will resort to it. My second time fighting him, he didn't cast it one time, and my kill was easily achieved. I think it should have been a thing he always does around half health instead of being just up to RNGesus. 49. Capped Lingzhi Guai. With this game having multiple mimic/plant mushroom bosses, it's nice that each of them is still unique instead of just reskins, which I'm sure many developers, including FromSoft, would have done. None of them is special on their own, but I found 9-Capped throwing his cap on you to be kinda funny. It slows you down, poisons you, summons deadly mushrooms at your feet, and makes you quite dapper indeed. I kinda wish it did all except the poison, so it wouldn't be just a punishment, but somewhat of an intended gimmick to this fight, one you could overcome with skillful play. But as is, you're incentivized to avoid his hat trick altogether. Outside of that, he's pretty swift and has shroom AoEs, which is enough for me to consider him decent. 48. Guangzhi, the brother of Guangmo. After slaughtering countless helpless furries,
as anyone should,
I wasn't expecting one to fight back this hard, this early on. He's got fire, long spinny combos, hard to read animations, and I would say that might be a detriment in this instance. I think it's too sudden of a jump from an intro boss you physically cannot die to, and wolves that fall like dominoes in front of you. Not to mention the boss after this is also a joke. It's not frustratingly hard or anything, just kind of a weird placement. Wondering why too, I guess, but that one is at least easy to read. And outside of the random difficulty spike, there isn't much to be discussed when he has such a limited moveset. 47's gonna go to Kang Jin Loong, who is by far the longest of the longs. I could see people going two ways with this boss, either really liking it or really disliking it. It's a cool looking boss with some beautiful attacks that feel impactful with the cracking of the ice, but it's also a really annoying boss to land hits on, at least until you've learned it thoroughly. Not because of bad hitboxes like in the case of the 100-eyed Daoist Master, but just because this is a flying noodle. Good luck hitting a flying noodle. From my experimentation, it seemed best to just wait for his tail slam attack and not commit to any other punish, unless you have immobilized at the ready. So to me it was a pleasant looking green and red light simulator. And this one has a very lackluster ultimate attack. I hate the ones that just make you run for a bit. There's nothing interesting about that, it's just a waste of time. 46. Cyan Loong. We finally have our first of the Sacred Dragon bosses. This one is hard to miss but easy to forget. I'm happy to fight a cool looking dragon man near the edge of a cliff and watch him soar through the sky with lightning attacks. But hey, I can think of a boss that did that a little better. The other Longs managed to stand apart from one another, and this one doesn't even stand apart from Chen Loong, who is just a goofy little throwaway NPC fight. He claimed a few kills by sheer unprecedented damage values, but I was never really bothered by having to redo it. Funny thing though, they finally gave another boss a combo mix-up. Only I never knew of it because the timing for the variation is the exact same. 45. Stone Vanguard. Moments like this when I'm supposed to talk about what's good or bad about Stone Vanguard are when I have to remind myself what I'm doing this for. All this so I can eventually talk about my favorite boss, Father of Stones. Stone Vanguard is of no relation sadly, as he doesn't sport a majestic dump truck. He does allow more jumping mid-combat, and I much prefer this Vanguard's use of minions versus his fiery counterpart. Here it's just a specific attack, not a gank fiesta. At 44 is Shigandang. Whenever I hear Shigandang, I either think of chicken dung or the worst boss ever created. No thought ever goes to the harmless rock gorilla. This boss has great ass, is decently aggressive, more shockwave AoEs in the style of Stone Vanguard, and gave me quite a bit of trouble even though I only fought him halfway through the following chapter. I wish I could wash out the bad memories of the giant ding dong with this, but I'm afraid there are no memories at all to be had with this guy. 43. Lingxuzi? Something like that. As pathetic as this boss is, it's hard to fault it when it's the first major boss of the game. But then again, Wandering White and Guangzhi had forced me to be prepared for much tougher foes than this. I still like the big bad wolf for looking simple yet cool, having smooth animations, especially that bite attack, cute detail with it sometimes licking its paw, and using the environment in its attacks. The startup to it is rather slow, but it's a good reaction check. I'll take this over running around for half a minute straight. Number 1, Father of Stones. Finally we have reached the peak. It will not and cannot get any better than this. He's got the ultimate dad bod, perfect cake, and a story that will make a grown man cry. Okay, but really, while he's ineffective at killing you and looks funny, he does have a neat backstory that us, the player, completely shit on by murdering him. I feel bad for the Stone family, none of them deserved this. In this guy's case, it's not just a shit boss they had AI generate a story for in post, but its story is on display even in gameplay, with the skeleton he carries. The fight itself is not particularly interesting though. It's fine enough. Number 41, Duskveil. Allow me to unveil the problems of this boss. It's fucking boring! Absolutely amazing looking and sounding with 3 cutscenes to boot. But all that is to disguise how lacking its mechanics are. I was especially salty after dying when the boss was 1 hit away from death, and slowly the realization set in that I'm going to have to go through the slog of a fight again. My fault for dying, of course, but there are many bosses I will gladly lose to 100 times. To this boss, not even once. I don't care if it's challenging or not, I just want it to be engaging. But overly scripted combos that I know the course of the moment they begin, and this is regardless of my position and distance, are not my idea of engaging gameplay. Erlang has long combos, but he can alter them on the fly to better adjust to your behavior. Yellow Long has very scripted combos, but I would say it remains engaging for how much they require perfection on your end to survive. Duskveil, however, will continue attacking at nothing if you've gotten out of the way, and his attacks are very easy and readable. Mostly just stomps. The Malekith-esque attacks are nice, I just wish they were used better since it's a lengthy fight. If there was a standout soundtrack to help fill those boring stretches of ankle biting with some enjoyment, I could give it a pass. But, well, there's a reason I've been using Wo Long soundtrack this entire video. Sorry, my ears just do not like the Wukong soundtrack. Still, I'll have to give Duskveil its due credit for the memorable presentation in its colors, cutscenes, monster noises, and animations. So much so that I'm putting it above bosses I enjoyed. That's the power of coolness factor. At number 40 is Rusty Gold Cart. In the last video I put the first 2 evil carts near the bottom of the list for being dull stationary turrets, but the same can't be said for the Rusty Gold one. There's also Crimson Silver Cart, but let's ignore that one. It's just an unfinished version of the golden one, and the golden is an unfinished version of itself. By this point, it may not be a unique design to this game, but even the 4th time fighting one of these wagons, they did feel novel to me design-wise. Fight-wise, they're almost like dragon bosses. Fire breaths, slam attacks, big AoEs, and GTFO moves. However, I feel for a boss with a girthy health bar and not that many moves, it really needed a Phase 2 to feel complete. 39. Chen Loong. I feel a lot of these bosses, particularly weak fucks like Chen, would have been a hell of a lot more disappointing had I made full use of my toolkit. But it became very quickly apparent to me early on that I should not use Pluck of Many or some of the stronger transformations in boss fights if I want to enjoy them. They're good for skipping encounters if I don't enjoy them. But having to actually engage with the mechanics of Chen Loong, I found him to be pretty fun, and more than that, very funny. I love the personality that's added to this by his dialogue. He makes a better use of spells than Guangmo, better use of flying and lightning than Cyan Loong, and better tentacle summon abilities than Cyan Loong. 38. Fuban. This isn't quite the same case as Duskveil, where presentation saves the fight, but rather this boss is the presentation. There's hardly anything else to it, it's a pure spectacle fight, but a decent one at that. We travel back in time to aid the Yellow Wind Sage defeat a giant bug. The most combat-heavy part is the very start, where you dodge claw swipes and then hit that claw. Since the mechanics aren't all that complex and it takes a while, I like that it feels like it's designed to be beaten on the first try quite easily with readable moves that won't require guesswork. The fight is practically over once you've passed the 70% HP threshold. From here on out you just marvel at the sight of a mountain-sized insect diving through sand, before the sage himself joins the fray and absolutely fucking demolishes the bug. Usually I don't appreciate the feeling of another character stealing the kill in an ending cutscene for a boss I mostly fought on my own, but in this case, yeah, honestly he did most of the work, he can have all the glory. 37. Tiger Vanguard, but with quotation marks. Yes, there's another boss in this game named Tiger Vanguard, but without the quotations. The one with quotation marks is presumably the other one's father we fight in the past, while he's guarding the entrance to Yellow Wind Sage's ritual. He's also right at the entrance to good tier because I feel the last few spots have been right on the cusp of moving up. Quote, Tiger Vanguard end quote lacks memorable presentation for sure, but it's just a solid fight. He's not held back by his advanced stage and can leap all over the place, do somersaults, and shout really hard. Good mini-boss, but doesn't quite stand the test of time, no pun intended, once you've completed your journey and bested countless more noteworthy adversaries. 36. King of the Flowing Sands and second Prince of the Flowing Sands. It's taken quite some time to get a proper gank boss in this ranking, unless you count Mother of Flamlings. I'd rather not. However, I do think the Rat Royalty is easily the weakest of them because the gank itself is a small part of it. It's much less synchronized than all the other ganks. The Tiny King is of little use in combat, so he tends to stay clear of you and camp atop stone pillars while his overson does the heavy lifting. He'll throw stones at you which you can block using the second prince as a shield, which is pretty funny. It's also helpful in staggering him out of attacks. So fighting them at the same time is kind of fun, but if you want a more solid solo fight, you should kill the king first, whom you can get to by breaking the stone pillars. The death of his father will send the prince into a frenzy. He unlocks more abilities, gets more aggressive, but not less stupid. Conversely, if you kill him first, the father will flee, only to be gobbled up by his firstborn. I think this is the only one of these duo fights that will have major consequences based on which you kill first, and I appreciate it for that. 35. Odd Cocoon. For a stationary boss, I found this one to be absolutely riveting with well-written dialogue, challenging mechanics, and unmatched wow factor. Wait, he has a second health bar? What? It's over. Now he's a multi-armed swordsman whose limbs are breakable, adding a nice incentive to target specific parts of his body. He's sadly defeated all too easily, but it's not the last we see of him. Soon he returns with less arms and more salt. The coolest thing about this boss I only noticed later rewatching is how he can swap around which arms hold his swords. I guess he disagrees because he decides he's better off without the extra arms, and this proves to be a fatal mistake, because contrary to him thinking this will even the fight, it actually tips it massively in your favor. It's pretty fun, but there just isn't a whole lot of meat here, and the little that there is gets forsaken halfway through. 34. Violet Spider. I'm going to exclude the second sister from this ranking since it's more of a teaser for the real spider showdown with the matriarch. This is a really well animated boss, but I also wanted to throw up after spending half an hour watching the boss wobble around. Mechanically, I feel there's not much to be discussed, it's all just fine enough. I like the look and sound of the poison claws and the foreshadowed blinding mechanic.
And don't look at her in the face, especially her eyes.
And now you see why. No pun intended. My favorite part though, of course, was Bashier's commentary again.
Still has a face. What goes to that?
However, the thing I was most impressed by was what followed after the fight, with a tsunami of arachnophobia. Like, god damn, if you have a severe fear of insects, just forget about playing Wukong. Number 33, Keeper of the Flaming Mountains. This boss, or really a series of mini-bosses, is to me kind of the epitome of this whole game. I think every individual phase here is kind of mediocre, but as a whole it still works. That could be said for a lot of this game for me. Wukong is a game that is greater than the sum of its parts. We've gone through so many fights I'm indifferent about, yet looking back through it all, I do so with fondness. There's so much variety and you just keep hopping from one encounter to the next, and in the end, what do I remember? Do I remember the boring stomp attacks by Captain Weiss voice? No, I remember the frantic search for a safe spot amid lasers and lightning. I remember Chen Loong wailing about being old, a giant beetle diving right at me, the sad story of Father of Stones, and so on. And I will certainly remember Pigman hoodwinking the Keeper, the Lake of Cum where the boss summons skyscraper pillars, a duel against Horsebro, and then going for some calming fishing. While I can't say I would want to listen to the music outside of this fight, I did at least notice it, so it's better than most already. It does kinda help set a bizarre tone that goes hand in hand with a bizarre fight. Okay, after looking more into it, it's because this song is not originally from Wukong. That's why it stands out. That's why it's good. And my assessment of the game being greater than the sum of its parts would also apply to number 32, and the last boss of this video, Centipede Guai. It's a throwaway fight, just to add quantity to this game. but I don't agree with the sentiment that quality is always over quantity, if there is this much quantity of good enough fights that are distinct from one another. After a certain point, quantity can become quality in and of itself. Obviously, this boss won't reshape how you think boss mechanics can be designed, but I found this thing to be an integral part in making sure Chapter 4's area, the Hollowed Web, would stick with you. God damn it, I swear I'm not trying to make these puns. I actually really loved this place, outside of some of its annoying enemies. It was equal parts beautiful, sad, disgusting, and scary. Centipede Guai encompasses all of the disgusting and scary. It looks more like a cockroach, and I don't want it near me. As much as I love the Pigman, he does relieve the tension from our fight against Violet Spider, who might otherwise be unsettling. But there's no such comfort here. You're on your own. Thankfully, it's very easy. And I noticed that the boss can do a different combo finisher based on your position, so that's a plus. The little centipedes coming after you was a cool ultimate attack too, and I like that Rock Solid will stun the boss out of the rolling attack. So it's really treading the line between decent and good tier. Maybe if it had a couple more attacks it would be a certified good tier fight, but the actual good tier bosses we're going to see in the next video. I'd say over 30 good bosses in a game is not bad at all, especially because most of the bosses in this video were pretty decent. But we'll see just how good those good fights are soon.